You probably heard that Bitcoin crossed $100,000 for the first time ever. But what you probably haven't heard of is how many designers that have been working in this space became phenomenally wealthy as well. If you're a designer and you've been trying to get into this space but haven't figured out how, this video is for you. Keep watching. Hi, I'm Sharan. I've been working in the crypto space. I think my first foray in this was back in 2017, where we did a pro bono project for a then unknown company called ZPay. But later they became one of India's biggest exchanges. But that experience actually got me into crypto and I learned a lot during this time. I've been working in the space as the chief design officer for a blockchain company at the moment. And what I want to do is share my learnings with you so that you can actually find the easiest route into the crypto space and start designing, because now more than ever we need designers in this field. In case you haven't heard, there was a DevCon event that took place in Bangkok recently, and this was attended by thousands of people as per usual. But what was different about this DevCon is the number of sessions that they had, which was focused on user experience design. This is incredible because this is an insular and largely geeky crowd that has been talking about technology and developing their infrastructure all this while. It's only been in the recent past and in fact highlighted for the first time ever in this conference that user experience is a central and a much required focus for the industry this time around. Even my own teammates who have been attending some conferences have suddenly been given a lot more focus, and people have been coming up to them and talking about how UX is so important to this field at the moment. I think what I'm seeing as a trend is that we've been building a lot of infrastructure all this while, and now we've come to a place where we are getting into this application mode. We are finding applications and more designed for mainstream users now. Earlier, I think it was catering a lot to the engineering crowd, and now that the concepts have been proven, I think the field itself, the industry itself is ready to take it to the mainstream and find applications and end users that will actually utilize these applications. So I think that's the reason for the shift to UX, and that's the reason I'm making this video, because there is that greater level of interest at the moment. When I got into this industry, the hardest part was getting my head around the mental model that I needed to create in order to understand the space better. I started my life as a developer, so I do have a technical inclination and a technical bent of mind, but even I found it extremely hard. What I wanted to do in this video is to actually explain to you, after distilling a lot of other noise and things like that, and you're going to face that when you if you try to get into this field by watching a bunch of videos. There's a lot of technical stuff and a lot of meta level stuff that you will run into, and kind of piecing all these things together is extremely confusing. I hope in this video I can actually cut through the clutter and kind of like speak to you as a designer and help you understand as a designer what it is that we're dealing with here, so that you get a good sense of it. And that's my goal for this video. Yeah, I want you to leave with a good sense of what this field is, how it's structured, what the architecture feels like, and get a sense for what the culture of this is and will be, so that you can leave and start designing effective applications and experiences in your own. So one of the useful mental models has been something that a man by the name Chris Dixon, he's a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz, or A16Z as it's commonly called. And what he has been speaking about is how the evolution of the web has been. So in his, I'm paraphrasing here, in his view, Web 1 was a read only, Web 2 was read and write, and Web 3 is the read, write and own paradigm. So what he's essentially talking about is how ownership is now an integral part of Web3. That is a useful model, and I really still use it a lot compared to the other mental models that I've heard of. But I think what I also would like is to kind of like understand the evolution of the web in terms of the structure. Because to me, I feel the structure influences the behaviors within the systems, and that is a key element to kind of discuss as well. So in my perspective, the way the web started, there was a case, and a very interesting case, and I think we can actually have a long discussion about just that case. But essentially, there was a case against this professor who was trying to publish encryption code, just the code, and he wanted to publish it. But the US military deemed that this code is classified as arms, therefore cannot be exported from the US. So that became a point of contention. But the web was released without the ability to encrypt things online, and it was that's where the term open web comes. So what happened? So eventually, because of the structure, only free things were being discussed online, and it felt a lot like, because it started within universities and they published a lot of papers and material like that, the initial web felt a lot like that as well. So it had a very freewheeling hippie culture that was set in. But in order to publish anything on the web, one actually had to build their own server, get static IP, get enough bandwidth, internet bandwidth, always on bandwidth, and then actually have the skill to put a website together and publish that information. And then you have let's say your site became popular. Yeah, it was very likely your web server is going to get a lot of traffic. Web servers crashing was a common thing that occurred. It was in fact something that people felt proud about, that I got so much traffic that my server crashed. Someone really needs to be really motivated in order to go through all these steps. But the everyday mom and pop shop who wants to sell their goods online was never going to enter this field. But service providers came in and they started building these websites and stuff for others, and that's how the commerce actually started flourishing online. But at the same time, there was a lot of service providers who started aggregating all these services. So they would build these websites for them, for the end users, but also build tools that would actually enable end users to actually build these websites and all that. So in a similar sense, every aspect of this web experience was actually offloaded. What was meant to be something that an individual did themselves became things that they bought and paid service providers for. It's just natural. That's how it went about. But the consequence of that is that there was a lot of centralization that actually formed. Today, if you launch a website, you cannot escape getting listed on Google, running ads on Google, and then for building your website itself, you'll use Shopify or something similar if it's commerce oriented. And for payments, you'd have to actually use something like Stripe. Whereas in the earlier days, you'd actually have to go to the bank, get a merchant account, and handle the payments and chargebacks and all the fraud cases, all those things yourself. But Stripe came in and stepped in to handle all of those aspects on behalf of the customers. So naturally, Stripe got a lot of people going to it. But while they were started as service providers, they are now the central points by which moderation also gets done. For instance, Stripe will not transact with certain countries or certain types of people and such. So you as a merchant, even if you have no problem with dealing with whoever is on the other side, you cannot transact with that person because Stripe won't let you do so. I use Stripe, but it's not their fault. They are following regulations and such. But the point is that they became the central points of failure for the conducting of commerce between two individuals who are willing to work together. So that is the outcome of this centralization forces. So also in Web 2, we have the read-write. So we were actually able to interact with things as well. So things like self-publishing, blogs and such became things that you would actually go to service providers for. And for people who don't want to publish full-fledged blogs and they just want to stay in touch with their community, so you had these social media platforms that came in to serve that need. But these are all points of failure now, and they are running their own algorithms, and you as an individual are subject to that algorithm. So what was meant to be a free and open internet where any individual could just hook up their computer or laptop, whatever it is, and get online and start, interacting with anybody else across the world through that system, became this closed system which was highly controlled and regulated and run by algorithms that one didn't always have a good sense of what is driving it, what its motivations are. And you were always in the service of something that you cannot understand really well. So encryption was actually a key requirement for the conducting of commerce between two individuals. But since that wasn't allowed, the initial web version 1 actually started being this free and open internet. So it wasn't for the romantic notion of it. It was just the structural limitations that actually enabled free sharing of information. There may have very well been people who want to share information freely, but that wasn't the only thing that was driving the initial web. There were structural reasons why. It's hard to have such an outside-in perspective about Web 2 because we're kind of living in it. It's like that parable where these two young fish are swimming by and an older fish swims by and says, "Hey, how's the water today?" And two young fish look at each other and say, "What's water?" So it's a lot like that. So we are living in it and we cannot kind of fathom or imagine what our world would be if it wasn't structured this way. But Web 2 has these difficulties and limitations that have formed because of the centralizing forces that underlie it. So Web 3 is actually an answer to all of this. So Web 3 is kind of like a return to Web 1 in a certain way, but with the enablement of cryptographic encryption, individuals can actually transact and communicate securely with each other. And that enablement, that technological enablement, actually spawns a whole plethora of things from it. People can do commerce directly without intermediaries. People can publish things and own it, like Dixon's read, write, own model. I can sign any blog article or this video or anything else which I produce digitally with my key, with my encryption key, and clearly claim that it is mine. This very aspect was not possible until now. So a whole bunch of things actually flourished based on this concept. So this is what Web3 really is. It's an answer to the limitations of the previous two versions of the web. But why do we need this, right? So if you don a North American mindset, you may not see the problem. But if you're somebody from Sudan or you live in Spain, your perspectives on life are very different. But on the web, because of this moderation and the centralizing forces that exist, the US-centric perspective has kind of like pervaded the internet as well. Plus, the moralities are actually like what to censor, what not to censor, what to allow, what not to say. These are all driven by Bay Area sensibilities. Why would a local culture which believes a certain thing be subject to the sensibilities and moralities of the Bay Area, a very small region in the US? It's ridiculous to think that that is the case. And that can only be broken when these powers are brought back to the users, and the encryption is a key aspect to that. Web3 does three things that are essential to the building of an egalitarian internet. First, it brings cryptographic technology, and this enables the kinds of transactions I just spoke about. It brings the power back into the individual's hands. So no longer are the things that I produce, the digital things that I produce, subject to the platform that I publish it on. It can remain in my ownership. So that has been clearly impossible until now. This encryption technology also allows the transfer of value between two individuals. So when I, using the blockchain as a supporting mechanism, I can actually transfer money to you, and that transfer is entirely recorded on the blockchain. So I cannot cheat you, you cannot cheat me, or anything like that. So true commerce can actually take place. Nor is my transaction between you and me moderated by any third individual and their sensibilities, right? I am in control of the transactions, and I make it directly with the people that I feel fit to work with. The second aspect that the Web3 brings is the permissionless nature. So I don't need to request anybody permission in order to be online. I don't have to fill out forms. I don't have to submit KYC or anything like that. I can get on there, I can create my application and publish it online without anybody's permission to do so. This creates a democratization force like none other that ever existed. The real motivation of creating the web in itself in the first place is now being brought about because of this. It's going to level the playing field once again. Thirdly, it brings about a censorship resistant nature to the fore so that anybody of any stripe can actually participate on it without any kind of restrictions. And since this operates on a network that cannot be controlled by any one individual, their sensibilities will not pervade across the web, and it truly becomes a free and open platform for expression like none other. So understanding Web3's evolution and the underlying structures actually enables us to clearly understand the role it plays and the purposes to which this platform can be utilized. I hope this left you with a good mental model now. Now we're going to take steps forward and understand certain aspects more deeply. Here's a detailed breakdown of some key elements of Web3. Firstly, let's understand that it's an entirely different stack that we're working with. So in the traditional Web 2, I'm going to call it traditional now because I think we are at the stage where we can call it that. So in the fading traditional Web 2, you got the front end, you got the logic and the application layer, as well as the database, which is all running on the same stack. And it is entirely owned by one company. In Web3, the network is a collection of nodes of computers that are running there. So the network itself is the computer, right? And the front end is an application that runs on top of this network. The data is actually stored on the blockchain that runs on the network, and it is typically public and open. So this structure itself, you can see the kinds of differences of user behavior that come in because of this. For instance, if a user wants to start using this application in Web 2, they go and create an account on there and start utilizing it, and whatever their usage generates as data is stored within that database. If this user wants to switch to a different application, their data is completely lost, and they have no other choice but to actually restart and create a new account somewhere else and start from scratch, building everything from scratch all over. Imagine doing that with your social media application like a Twitter or something. You have to go ahead and recreate all your tweets on another platform. Is that even feasible, right? In Web3, there's none of that. Firstly, there's no idea of creating an account because the wallet itself contains the key, the private key that says this is who I am. So there's only a signing into an application. So I just hit connect wallet and I'm typically signed in already. So there's no idea of creating an account. The creation of an account is an optional step, really. But the fact that I've signed with the wallet itself enables me to start using most of these applications. So, but let's say I want to go to another competitor and use some other interface which I like better. There's no need for me to move the data. I just start using that application, go click connect wallet on that other application, and my data, which is on the blockchain, is directly sourced into this other application. So I pick up wherever I left off on the other application. The second point I want to talk about is permissionlessness. So if I wanted to develop this kind of an application on Web 2, my own application to view, let's say, tweets in a different way, I've got to go sign up with Twitter for an API access, right? I did this. I actually went and tried to develop this application this past week. The first step I have to do to request API access to access my own data on Twitter is to write a 200-word essay on why I want to do so. Then I have to accept terms and conditions that the Twitter lawyers have put in there, saying that I will not do certain things XYZ with it. This is still my data that I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about API access to access all of Twitter's data or anything like that. This is my own data. And after having done all this, I am given limited access to my data and I can perform limited actions on it. My data. I'm not sure I can even say that anymore, because this feels like it belongs to somebody else and they are giving me permission in order to use this. On Web3, as long as I'm using my own private key to sign stuff, I'm good to go. So I can declare that this data belongs to me and I can access it and utilize it as much as I want in any way I want. So that's the difference between permissionlessness. And just like I mentioned, the third point I want to talk about is digital property rights. So all the tweets that I've ever published on the Web3 platform has been signed by my wallet. So it clearly has already been declared that it belongs to me. So if I ever want to get my data, I can just prove that this belongs to me and just go with it. If anybody ever copies it, there's a trail that is created over here, and I can clearly establish my ownership of this, or my primacy of having created this content in the first place. And the fourth point I want to talk about is composability. Web3 is built on standards. Because that is the case, there can be multiple applications that can actually work together. In the previous example that I gave you, let's say somebody else wants to come and build an application that takes all the photos from my Twitter posts, the Twitter equivalent posts, and utilize the music from a sound music application that I've used and favorited a bunch of tracks on there maybe. It can combine these two aspects and deliver an entirely new experience. And it can all be done without anybody interacting with with a development team within a company or anything like that. They can see the code, they can actually understand exactly what to do with it and build this entirely separate experience if they want to. Sourcing data that the user using their encrypted key gives permission to use. So that's what is possible because of composability over here. Another important concept to understand is pseudonymity. So people think that transactions on the blockchain are anonymous. They are not. They're all signed by these keys, which are easily identifiable against a particular wallet. Now, if the connection between this person and this and their wallet is established, then the user can be completely identified. So, and it's also called doxing. So this is something that people in Web3 rarely want to do. So but the fact that I want to leave you with is that this data is not anonymous at all. It is pseudonymous. And the final point I want to kind of highlight to you, which is kind of important for you to remember as a designer, is the fact that there's a difference in speed on Web3. Because of the decentralized nature of things, there are all these computers that kind of need to communicate with each other across the web. The distances and the latency is quite high. So you might be used to developing for applications which run on AWS or anything like that. So the transactions are super fast. But that's not the case because of the decentralized nature. The transactions and the finality of transactions can take a long time. So while the speeds are being bettered over time, the fact is that there is a difference in the performance of applications between these two platforms. So keep that in mind. And so there are ways to work around it. And one of the best things that I've seen is on a social application called Hey, which when I post something, it shows up on my timeline, but is actually written to the blockchain at a later point. So for me as an end user, I don't feel the difference. And whenever I want to check on the blockchain whether my message exists, it's typically at a later point, and by then it's already written. So you can manage the expectations of the users in this way. But the point is you have to. All right. So now let's talk about the key challenges, but I also think of them as opportunities that are there in Web3. So in 1900, there was a person by the name David Hilbert who set up the 23 mathematical problems that need to be solved by future mathematicians. So it was like a set of challenges that mathematicians were meant to solve, right? These are kind of like the goals that they set. So in a similar spirit, I want to set across the kinds of problems that we have over here for UX designers. So first and foremost is the wallet, the challenge of the wallet. So firstly, the wallet is a misnomer to begin with. So it doesn't hold anything. It's not a container for anything. In fact, all the tokens and coins that a user holds is actually recorded on the blockchain. It's a ledger entry on the blockchain. So there's nothing actually contained within this thing. A wallet is a combination of a public and private key. That's it. That's the end of it. So it's more like an access card or an ID card that one can utilize across the web. But names aside, the usage of the wallet is the most complex part that exists. This is because there's no other equivalent in Web 2 which does exactly what this is. People try to equate it with user ID and password, and it's absolutely not the same. So if you do use that mental model and that equivalence, you can end up taking steps that will defeat your security. Okay, so that is another aspect that really needs to be managed. But how do you communicate this complex idea of public-private key cryptography to an end user? It's a huge challenge, and the fact is that if you ever reveal your private key anywhere, the entire thing, your entire accounts and everything can be taken over immediately. And I don't think most people in Web 2 operate with that level of security in mind. So that is a huge challenge for users of Web 3. And this is a whole new thing that they need to learn from scratch in order to be effectively using Web 3. The second big challenge that exists is managing security. And like I mentioned earlier, you have this public-private key, and that's your entire security level. Like in Web 2, you might just use a user ID and password for an application that you don't care about so much, right? You're just trying it out or something, you might just use a user ID and password. And for your email, you might have like a two-factor authentication kind of setup. And for your bank account, you typically have not only two-factor user ID password and two-factor, but also an OTP as a verification method for high-value transactions or whatever else you have. The point is that there are levels of security that are actually possible on Web 2, which are not possible on Web 3. You only get the highest level of security, and that's it, right? So in this, and there's no way to scale that security levels either. And I spoke to you about pseudonymity earlier. So that's another aspect to kind of consider over here, because if I ever reveal my public key to somebody else, they know that it belongs to me. And because I use this public key to identify me everywhere online, you can imagine a scenario where on a social network site, people might reveal my name. If one were motivated, they could actually track all these actions on the blockchain and examine what I've been doing. But the problem is, if I also stored my entire money on the same wallet, they'd also know that I have this much on the blockchain. And that's a problem. So we need to develop better security mechanisms over here. And that's a challenge that we all as UX designers need to kind of figure out, including you. And finally, in case a user ever forgets the private key and they don't store it right, they could lose complete access to their wallet and their money and their social accounts, everything altogether. So that's another aspect that has no equivalence with Web 2. So people are not used to doing this kind of stuff in order to be able to transition to Web 3 as easily. None of these concepts kind of carry over from anywhere else. These are all novel. So we need to kind of like, as designers, enable our new users to understand the requirements of this platform. Another massive problem that exists within Web3 is the idea of liquidity fragmentation. In Web3, because it's based on blockchains, there is something called the blockchain trilemma to kind of consider. So you can imagine it as a triangle where the quality of scalability, speed, and decentralization are forces that pull each other. The short way to understand this is that you can have two of the qualities but not the third. So you can have any two of the qualities but not the third over here. So for that reason, you have different blockchains that serve different purposes. So some blockchains were built for speed, whereas others focus on security and stability, and they want to operate with the highest level of security so that people can come and store their money on that blockchain. So there are these kind of like purpose-built blockchains. But the consequence of that is that I might have some money on the high throughput network, and I can have some money on the high security network. So in this particular instance, my money is divided between these two things, right? So I'm never in full control of all my money across these two blockchains with the same wallet. And that's the challenge. So if I ever want to take a loan, I would have to choose on which network I'm going to be taking it on. and I might have to take a loan here as well as over here, and that loan may not be available at the same rates and prices. So these are the kind of difficulties that come about because of the liquidity fragmentation. And this is a huge challenge that needs to be addressed. There is a concept called chain abstraction, and there are people working on it just like we are at my company. There are solutions that are still required that need to be solved over here. And I think more designers coming in and thinking about this problem can actually develop that solution. And finally, the big challenge that Web3 has is the problem of public relations. The mainstream media has been used in order to make Web3 crypto in general look like it's only being used by criminals. But you can see in my description so far, it's not meant for criminals. It's meant to bring power back to the users. So the people that are in power and don't want that transition of power to occur have been making it look like as if Web3 and crypto broadly is only meant for criminals. And that perception has been changing. And the fact that Bitcoin has crossed more than 100,000 now, which nobody believed would happen, has brought a sense of credibility to this industry at this moment. But a lot more work needs to be done. I think this technology shouldn't be something that any end user should worry about or think about while using it. I think they need to think about the application that is being used and the goals being achieved through that application. Nobody should really worry about the underlying technology at the end of the day. But if the word crypto is utilized, it's got a negative implication at the moment, and that needs to be changed. So we really, as designers, could also contribute a lot to making that perception change occur. In the crypto field itself, you have a lot of applications like DeFi, decentralized finance, NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. You might have heard of NFTs because that was much more consumer-centric. And you have a lot of other applications like decentralized social and so on, right? But these are all crypto-centric use cases. How can we utilize crypto? The challenge has been that to find an application that an everyday mainstream user can use crypto for, which is better than Web2. So I think there are a few candidates. I won't say there's none, but there are things like real-world assets and these ideas that are being spoken about. But I think there can be a lot more applications that can come in, especially from designers who have worked in other fields. They might actually, once they understand crypto and its applications and the possibilities, they can put the things together and actually find new applications and use cases. And that's what I'm hoping for with new designers like you coming into this field. And finally, AI. I don't think any list would be complete without talking about AI. So here it is. So there's a burgeoning field where AI and crypto can actually work together. And while AI has dominated the mind space of most of the world, there are a number of creative things that can actually happen when AI and crypto come together. The most recent fascinating idea that I've heard is that AI bots are trading crypto. I don't mean trading in terms of on the markets, but they are actually creating these cryptos and utilizing the proceeds that come from the crypto for specific applications such as climate change and such. It's fascinating. This entire field is fascinating. And I think I'm going to leave some examples for you in the notes for you to look at and watch these other videos where these two things have come together to create these fascinating use cases. But I think there's a lot more that still can be done. And designers like you coming into this field can actually make that difference. All right, let's assume I've convinced you that this is a valid and useful place for you to come and do your work on. There are certain trends for you to keep in mind when you're in it. Firstly, the demand for design is kind of like going through the roof. I already mentioned the conferences and such, but keep this other data point in your mind. Trump has announced that Bitcoin is going to become one of the US reserve assets. Now, if and when it actually comes to pass, Bitcoin would have given legitimacy to this entire industry all over. So you can imagine the number of new applications that come in because of that. Another signal that you got to keep in mind is Stripe, the payments platform, has bought the blockchain company called Bridge, and for a $1.1 billion acquisition, right? Why would Stripe do this, right? And you can bet your bottom dollar that if Stripe is doing this, every other fintech company is going to jump into the fray. There are obvious use cases for finance and crypto to work together. The Rails, for example, is an extremely important use case to utilize crypto for. You make your payment in country A through fiat in country A, but it's transmitted to the second country, the destination country, over crypto, and then converted back into fiat again. And that's just one use case. But I'm sure Stripe is thinking of several others, and all the other fintech companies that are going to follow suit are going to actually come in and do some amazing and creative things, is what I'm expecting. All of them are going to require designers, of course, to think about these use cases and design and the applications to be used by regular individuals and not crypto nerds like me. The second trend that I want you to keep in mind is that what I kind of hinted at earlier, which is that initially this field was designed by engineers to be used by engineers. But you're seeing the shift to a mainstream use case and to mainstream users, and that is a trend that has just started. It's an extremely important trend. I'm not going to re-emphasize the reasons I already stated, but this is a changing dynamic. But what you need to keep in mind is that any application that you build today is probably in service of multiple user personas. So you might actually develop interfaces that serve not just the mainstream user who doesn't want the complexity, but also for the engineer who is currently one of the biggest user in this field, to actually expose the complexity that they want at the right time. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, that if you're joining now, you're kind of building in the transitory phase of crypto. A third trend to keep in mind is the changing visual design styles. So initially crypto was, like I mentioned, filled with engineers. So a lot of dark themes and gradients and color gradients and really flashy orbs and spheres and atoms. These were the concepts that have been used in this field. And if a new crypto company came in, they kind of needed to signal that they were a crypto company, so they kind of adopted the same ideas. But we are seeing a shift away from that, and because of the mainstream influence, the dark theme is kind of going lighter in direct opposition to where it was coming from. So they want to signal the opposite, and they want to signal simplicity. So the visual design landscape is also changing at the same time. So keep that in mind as well when you're entering this field. But let's talk about the reasons why you should be in this field. So I already kind of touched upon the point why Web3 was created, to bring power back into the user's hands. But there are other reasons also, if you needed one, to get into Web3. Regardless of the fact that Bitcoin is at 100,000, has crossed the 100,000 mark now, it is still not late. It is extremely new even now. This is still new, and it's still very early in this field. So there are not a lot of standards that have been set and familiar interfaces that have been developed that are getting applied everywhere. There are a few, but it's not like it's so well set in stone that things cannot change. So you can actually come in and set standards and define things in a greenfield space like this one. So if that excites you, then do come in. If you're tired of having worked on one more e-commerce platform with which adheres to all these rules that has been set and understood already, then this is something that is brand new and quite fascinating, because you're trying to figure out what works over here. So you can come in and set standards. That's reason number one. The second point is about the enormous growth that I've spoken about. I already mentioned how Stripe is coming into this. 2024 was an excellent year for this field, but 25 is set to look even better. The curves and the graphs are all pointed even at a much steeper incline even now. I'm talking about user adoption. So crypto has already got the higher adoption rate than even the internet. The fact that it is higher in adoption of the entire internet itself is a scary statistic and a very impressive statistic to keep in mind. So there's enormous growth potential in this field. And in terms of professional growth, this field is going to enable you to think about new concepts and new ideas, like no other time than the start of the internet. Once again, it kind of like feels like the birth of the internet once more. It's an electric feeling, and lots of things are new. If you attend one of these conferences, you'd see everybody's filled with such energy over here. Your potential for professional growth is extremely high. You'd be working with a lot of new things and learning a lot of new skills all at once. And if none of these reasons made sense to you, the final reason is do it for the money. As I already spoke about, there's a lot of demand for crypto, and designers who understand crypto is a very small subset. So they are able to command very high salaries to begin with. But even otherwise, instead of ESOPs like in regular startups, designers here are compensated using tokens. ESOPs going up by 10-20% actually leaves you feeling really good in the traditional world. But that's 10-20x over here in this field. If you're a startup, or supposing you're working with a startup and your token actually makes it to the big time, this is life-changing money, right? A lot of designers have already done this, so I can tell you from first-hand experience that I've met designers who have made a ton of money by just being in this field. So if nothing else, do it for the money. But the fact is, this field needs you as a designer, so make sure that you get it. So while I've given you the highlights, this is by no means meant to be an exhaustive list of things that you're going to have to learn in this field. I've created a playlist which will actually cover much more. I think the playtime is about 22 hours. So take your time in going through the various videos. But it gives you a broad perspective of what you're dealing with over here. And it's a fantastic ride, in my opinion. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to answer your questions. If there are topics that you get stuck on and you think it's a good candidate for a video, please share that with me. I'll be happy to work on that, do the research and share the information with you. I hope this video has been useful and I've earned a like from you. Don't be shy about hitting the button. It's a great way to express that you found this useful. Also, if you decide to jump into Web3, go get a wallet like our Rabby or Zerion or even our Arcana wallet, and share your public address in the comments. And what I'll do is I'll send out a gift to commemorate your entry to Web3. I think it'll be nice. Otherwise, I wish you the best in this amazing journey that you're gonna set upon. I really hope you do come in and make this place amazing. Until the next video, ciao.